One man was able to manipulate the lives of countless victims and navigate his way through the highest echelons of power for decades. You might think this sounds like something out of a crime thriller, a work of fiction. You'd be wrong. Because if I told you that this man had a massive network, not just of criminals, but of the most powerful and influential people on earth, you would probably ask, why wasn't this all over the headlines? Why wasn't anyone, held accountable? But what if I told you this wasn't just a story of a man abusing his power, but a story of a system that kept him going? A system built not by one man, but by everyone who chose to look the other way. The question isn't just how Epstein got away with it for so long, but why the systems he touched. Governments, corporations, even the media made sure no one ever really asked too many questions. Why, in the age of transparency and accountability, did we allow a system to protect this evil man? Today, we're about to tear open the dark world of Epstein, a place where vital secrets are still locked away, even today. So, take a seat and relax. I'm the only one who's brave enough to strip away the lies. Someone has to say it. No one else ever will. But to understand how we got here, you need to know who Epstein was, and why, despite the undeniable weight of his crimes, his story is still not over. Jeffrey Epstein was born in 1943 in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in modest means, in a family of modest means. But early on, he displayed a drive for something bigger, something greater. He entered the world of finance, quickly working his way up from a teaching job to managing money for the ultra-wealthy. It wasn't long before he ingrained himself into elite circles. By the 1980s, Epstein had already built a network. He wasn't just a financier anymore, he was a kingmaker. He had connections to celebrities, politicians, bankers, and socialites, some of the most influential people on the planet. He didn't just exist within these circles, he controlled them. Epstein owned properties that spanned the globe, from private islands in the Caribbean to lavish homes in Manhattan. He had access to places that no one else could even dream of stepping into. By the 1980s, Epstein had already built a network. He wasn't just a financier anymore, he was a kingmaker. He had connections to celebrities, politicians, bankers, and socialites, some of the most influential people on the planet. He didn't just exist within these circles, he controlled them. Epstein owned properties that spanned the globe, from private islands in the Caribbean to lavish homes in Manhattan. He had access to places that no one else could even dream of stepping into. But that's where the story shifts. Because behind the facades of wealth and power, Epstein's influence wasn't just about making money or rubbing elbows with the rich and famous. It was about control. Control over people. Control over young women. And ultimately, control over the entire system that allowed him to operate with impunity. Epstein's modus operandi was horrifyingly simple. Groom, manipulate, abuse, repeat. And he did it for decades. Girls, many underage, were lured into his world under the guise of a glamorous lifestyle, only to be trapped in an endless cycle of exploitation. Epstein wasn't just a predator, he was a master manipulator, playing people like pawns in a vast, dangerous game. It was easy at first to dismiss the accusations as rumors, but when you look closer, you see a pattern. Survivor after survivor stepped forward to share their stories of abuse, pain, and fear. It wasn't just one or two girls, it was dozens, then hundreds. And the system that was supposed to stop him, the legal system, the courts, the police, did nothing. In 2008, Epstein was finally charged. But when he pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a minor, his punishment was almost laughable. He served just 13 months in a county jail, and in the process, was allowed to leave the jail 6 days a week to work. This was not a mistake. This was a decision, a deliberate, cynical decision by a system that was complicit. They protected him. The charges, minimized. The victims, ignored. For a moment, it seemed like Epstein's reign was over, but it wasn't. He didn't go away. He didn't fade into obscurity. Instead, he restructured, expanded, and solidified his power. Epstein was like a ghost, present but untouchable, hidden in plain sight, continuing his abuse while the world moved on, pretending not to see. Then came 2019, and with it, the final act of Epstein's criminal story. Epstein was arrested again, but this time, it wasn't going to be so easy to let him slip away. The federal charges brought against him were deeply serious. Accusations of sex trafficking minors, of using his influence to exploit vulnerable girls at multiple properties. He was looking at decades of imprisonment, the end of his empire. But then something happened, something strange. While Epstein awaited trial, he died in federal custody. Officially ruled a suicide. I want you to take a pause. Ask yourself very sincerely this question. I failed to get an answer. Maybe you can tell me what you think in the comments. Why was Epstein, the man who had a network so deeply entrenched in global power, left alone in a cell? Why were the guards that night asleep? Why wasn't he being actively watched? Was this an accident, or was it planned? Think about that for a second. There are documents that prove everything, not just about Epstein's operations, but about the very people who helped keep him untouchable. These are the people who shaped the policies, the systems, and the laws that protected him. The reason some of the files remain sealed is simple. If they were released, they would blow the lid off everything. The system can't afford that. The recent 2026 release showed the tip of the iceberg. The names we knew, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and the rest, are all in the files. But these names are just the surface. The truth is, Epstein was a man of secrets. And it's not just his deeds that need to be uncovered, it's the people behind the scenes, pulling the strings, that we still haven't fully unmasked. His ties ran deep, not just into the elite circles we've heard about, but into places we've never even considered. The network Epstein built wasn't a series of isolated interactions. It was a massive, intricate web designed to maintain total control. And the fact that so many files are still hidden speaks volumes about who still benefits from keeping this truth buried. Now let's talk about why this matters to you. Why this story isn't just one of scandal or corruption or bad people getting away with terrible things. This isn't just an expose, it's a wake-up call. The Epstein case isn't just about one man's evil deeds. It's about the system that allowed him to operate without restraint. This is a system built on power and privilege, and it's a system that's still working right now in ways we don't fully understand. You see, when Epstein's crimes were finally exposed, it wasn't just about one man's empire crumbling. It was about how deep the corruption runs, and how the systems that protected Epstein were never really fixed. They're still there. They're still running. They are still controlling the flow of information, the access to power, and the lives of millions of people. And the worst part? Many people still don't see it. They don't see how controlled they are, how much influence the few have over their lives. This is why the Epstein case isn't just a wake-up call. It's an alarm bell for the future. All right, here's where things get interesting, well, more interesting, because if you thought that the Epstein case was just a story of a rich man who got away with his crimes for too long, it's time to take a step back and look at the real story. And I'm not talking about Epstein's personal transgressions. I'm talking about something bigger, something that involves more than just Epstein himself. Something that, when you really think about it, should make you question the whole system that keeps this madness going. Let's break it down, shall we? Epstein wasn't just a predator. He wasn't just a rich guy with some fancy properties, private jets, and a big black book of famous names. No, Epstein was part of something far more sinister. He was enabled by a system, a network of power, protection, and let's be real, a whole lot of money. And this is where the real danger lies. Epstein didn't just get away with it because he had a few billion bucks. No. He thrived because the system was built to protect him. And I don't just mean his friends and business partners. I'm talking about the way the legal system, governments, and corporations operate, and how they often choose to look the other way when someone with the right connections is involved. You think the system is working? It's working for some, but definitely not for all. Epstein is proof of that. The legal system bent and twisted to protect him. The same legal system that should have been keeping him in check was busy rolling out the red carpet for him, turning a blind eye, and pretending everything was just fine. Let's not forget about the infamous 2008 plea deal. Oh, the plea deal. Let me paint the picture for you. Here's Epstein facing federal charges for sex trafficking minors, a case that, had it been handled properly, could have made history as a major conviction. And yet, in the light of day, this man walks away with just 13 months of county jail time. Let's just say that sentence was a joke, but not to those who were in on the joke. Epstein knew exactly who to talk to, who to bribe, and how to get the deal of a lifetime. The federal prosecutors at the time, they dropped the ball. They didn't just miss the opportunity to throw the book at him, they handed him a get-out-of-jail-free card. And you know what happened next? Epstein didn't just serve time, he was allowed to leave jail 6 days a week. That's right, 6 days a week. He could go out, live his life, and keep doing whatever he wanted. Is that how justice works? Apparently, in Epstein's world, it does. But here's the kicker. This wasn't a one-off. It's not like a rogue prosecutor made a mistake and the system learned from it. No, this was a pattern. Epstein was able to dodge the law because the system, the one we trust to keep the criminals in check, was rigged in his favor. So now we have to ask, why did the system protect him? Was it just a fluke, a mistake that couldn't be fixed? Or was there something deeper going on here, something bigger than one man's criminal empire? In January 2026, the DOJ finally released millions of pages of documents from the Epstein investigation. For the first time, we got to see what Epstein's world really looked like, at least in part. We saw emails, flight logs, photos, evidence that honestly we should have had years ago. And yet, even with all this released information, there's still so much we don't know. So why are these files still hidden? You'd think, after everything Epstein did, the public would have a right to know everything. But no, some of the files, for reasons unknown, are locked away in a dark vault somewhere, protected by legal loopholes, and the system that allowed Epstein to thrive in the first place. And let's not forget, these aren't just random bits of paper. These are files that could blow the lid off the entire thing. But the question remains, why? Why are these files still under lock and key? What exactly are we not supposed to see? Why, after all these years, are we still kept in the dark? It's not because someone missed a deadline or forgot to press send on the release forms. No, these files are deliberately hidden. And there's the thing. Those files, those missing pieces, are what will truly expose the power structures behind Epstein. The files are like the missing puzzle pieces that, once placed, will reveal the full extent of Epstein's influence and the corruption that allowed it to go unchecked. It's like someone's been working overtime to keep the full story hidden from view. And every time we get close to the truth, another file is conveniently locked away. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the elites. The ones who were closely connected to Epstein, but for some reason still haven't been held accountable. The global leaders, business magnates, and public figures who are still immune from facing any legal consequences for their involvement. Here's the thing. Epstein wasn't just a rich man with a sick hobby. Epstein was integrated into the global elite. He wasn't hanging out with just any crowd. He was in the rooms with the most powerful people in the world. And while the media has been busy naming big names like Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Donald Trump, it's important to understand that these names are just the tip of the iceberg. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the realization that the system, the same one that has been called out for allowing Epstein to thrive, hasn't really changed. The elites are still running the show. The same people who protected Epstein are still in power, still calling the shots, and they're still untouchable. The question isn't just who Epstein knew, it's who else is out there, still pulling the strings. It's time for a wake-up call, and it's about more than just Epstein's crimes. It's about a system that lets people like him operate with impunity. This is not just about one man's misdeeds. This is about what happens when the powerful can do whatever they want and never face the consequences. If you've ever wondered why justice feels so out of reach for regular people, this is why. The elites, the billionaires, the politicians, the CEOs don't just operate outside of the law. They are the law. They're the ones who get to decide what's public and what stays hidden. In Epstein's story, his ability to operate without consequence is proof of that. Now that we've peeled back the layers of Epstein's empire, his connections, and the ways the system failed to stop him, it's time to talk about the big question. What does all of this mean for the rest of us? Let's not sugarcoat it. We've got a problem. And it's bigger than just a bad guy running a trafficking ring. Epstein didn't just exploit vulnerable girls. He exploited the entire system, manipulating the same structures that are supposed to protect us, the little guy. And if we're being honest with ourselves, the sad truth is that Epstein's story isn't an outlier. It's a symptom of a much larger, much more dangerous disease. You've got to ask yourself, why is it that someone like Epstein, a man with a dark history of criminal activity, was able to sit at the same table as some of the most powerful people on the planet and no one stopped him? Is that really because of some lucky coincidence? Or is it because the system was rigged to protect him and others like him? The deeper you dig, the more you see that Epstein was just the tip of the iceberg, a small cog in a larger machine that thrives on secrecy, manipulation, and impunity. And here's where the plot thickens. What does it say about our society, our values, when this kind of thing can happen right under our noses? If Epstein, a man with a record as long as your arm, could continue his operation for years without facing real consequences, what does that say about the power structures that protect the wealthy and powerful? Let's talk about elite impunity. Because Epstein wasn't just a predator. He was an integral part of a system that benefits from keeping people like him in play. Think about this. How many other powerful people have gotten away with much worse than they should have? How many have been allowed to skirt accountability because of their wealth or connections? Epstein's case is just the one that finally, after all these years, slipped through the cracks of that system. It's almost like there's a hidden rulebook for the rich and powerful. Sure, we're all taught that everyone is equal under the law, but the reality is a bit different, isn't it? The rules are designed to favor those with power and influence. They're the ones who get to decide what's legal, what's acceptable, and what gets swept under the rug. We all know that the justice system doesn't work equally for everyone. Hell, we've seen it time and time again, whether it's in criminal cases, financial fraud, or even corporate malfeasance. The rich don't get held accountable the way regular folks do. In Epstein's story, it's a perfect example of how that system functions. It's one thing for a man like Epstein to evade justice once, maybe twice, but decades of protection? That doesn't happen without institutional backing. Whether it's through cozy relationships with political figures or pressure from corporate interests, Epstein had the perfect shield. He had the system on his side. It wasn't just about who he knew. It was about how those connections allowed him to operate without consequence. he didn't have to worry about the little things like getting caught, because the big things, the powerful people, were covering for him. But what does this reveal about the larger system that allows this? What does it mean for you and me when the rules don't seem to apply equally? Now, let's talk about those sealed files, the ones that, despite the public outcry and all the investigative fervor, are still locked away. What's in them? Who's in them? What secrets are being protected? The release of files in January 2026 was supposed to be the big moment of truth, the moment when everything came to light. But instead, what we got was a glimpse, just a tiny glimpse, of the true extent of Epstein's empire. Oh, sure, we got flight logs, photos, and even some emails. But what about the rest? What about the thousands of pages that remain hidden? What's in those files? I know what you're thinking. Why are they still hiding them? If the case is done, the man is dead. The major players have been identified. What's the point of keeping the rest of this information sealed? It's almost like someone somewhere is still trying to protect something. And those files? They're the key to unlocking the full story. But don't be fooled. The truth isn't just locked away in those files. It's buried in plain sight. It's in the way the elite circles are still untouched by the law. It's in the fact that Epstein's connections are still standing while the victims are left to fight for justice on their own. Why are we still letting the powerful dictate the terms of justice? Now, here's where the rubber hits the road. This story isn't just about Epstein or even about Epstein's crimes. It's about you. It's about me. It's about all of us. The reason this matters, why we all need to pay attention, is because this is happening to us. Maybe not in the same exact way, but the system that protects men like Epstein exists because the system is built to protect the powerful. So, you want to know why this matters? Because we're all part of the same system. A system that says, if you've got money, you've got power. And if you've got power, you can get away with just about anything. We can sit here and point fingers at Epstein all day, but the truth is, he was just a cog in a much bigger machine. And here's the catch. This isn't just going to change on its own. We can't just wait around for the next big scandal to break. We have to demand transparency. We have to demand accountability, because if we don't, we're just going to keep letting powerful men like Epstein operate in the shadows. So what can we do? Well, first off, we don't just accept the status quo. We start asking questions. We push for transparency. We demand that these systems we trust are held accountable. We don't just let the rich and powerful call the shots anymore. We need to recognize that the world is not built on fair competition. It's built on who you know and what you can get away with. And let's not forget, the power of the people is still the most dangerous weapon there is. But we have to wake up. The same system that protected Epstein is still operating. It's still protecting the people who enabled him. So, what can you do about it? First, you can start by educating yourself. Dig into the facts. Don't just trust the headlines, do the research. You can hold people accountable, you can demand change, and most importantly, you can be aware of how the system works. Only then can you start demanding justice for all. It's not going to happen overnight. But here's the truth. If we don't act now, if we don't start asking questions, the next Epstein will just come around again. But here's the catch. We have the power to stop that from happening. And if we don't, we'll only have ourselves to blame. So, the next time you hear about a powerful figure getting away with something, think about Epstein, think about the system, and ask yourself, who's next?